Parvez ist Global Social Media Managerin für die Sprach- und Lern-App Duolingo. Sie verantwortet die Strategie, das Community Management und die Partnerschaften mit Creatern auf allen großen sozialen Plattformen. Besonders beeindruckend ist der Erfolg des TikTok-Kanals von Duolingo. Hier gelang es der Social Media Managerin und ihrem Team, die Anzahl der FollowerInnen von 50.000 im Jahr 2021 auf heute über 6,6 Millionen zu steigern. Dafür wurde der Kanal kürzlich von AdAge als einer der Top 5 Brand TikTok-Accounts ausgezeichnet. Was als kleiner Test begann, hat sich zu Duolingos bisher erfolgreichster Social Buzz und Word-of-Mouth-Initiative entwickelt. Zaria versteht sich selbst als BIPOC, Black, Indigenous and People of Color. Ihre Story zeigt, wozu die jüngere, diversere Generation fähig ist, wenn ihr kreative Freiheit und Vertrauen entgegengebracht wird. Wir freuen uns sehr auf den spannenden Talk mit Zaria Parvez und Pilotgeschäftsführer Moritz Hoffmann. Herzlich willkommen, Zaria und Moritz.
Well, hey Zaria, thanks a lot for joining us on stage tonight. My very first question, and also to inform the audience, for everybody who doesn't use TikTok yet and doesn't have any experience with the specific language that is talking on that app, could you quickly describe what Duolingo has been posting and talking about in the last couple of months and years there?
I feel like this is the hardest question, explaining a meme in like a small little, couple sentences. I think the way that I like to think about it is our TikTok is a ton of little videos that kind of build up this sitcom and almost this world of characters that we've developed for our brand, but we've really extended beyond what a brand would normally post, but it's really almost internet satire and making fun of the trends that are there, and all of a sudden this big green owl is also involved. So it's really just a sitcom that you can tune into, and each video is kind of like a small episode that looks into the life of being at Duolingo and Duo, our owl's life.
So if we're going to talk about this, we're going to talk about Duo, right? So if we talk about Duo, that's exactly the image that you're on, the mascot that your brand essentially has been talking about. So take us a bit through the journey. Has there been an initial moment when you started with that specific content? How did you come up with the idea, or how did the start look like initially?
Yeah, so what a lot of people don't know is this is actually my first job out of university. So I honestly just took the job because it was available. I graduated in 2020 during the pandemic, so I didn't really have that many options, which is just the truth. And this was something in marketing, and I was exploring it, and I was like, why not? Let's go see what happens. And the first year of my job was very what you would expect, I think, from a language learning app. What a junior talent usually tends to do, just posting like Happy Earth Day and things like that. And I remember at the time, TikTok, the TikTok UK team came to us, and they're like, there's potential here. And our CEO was like, it's not a company priority. And I was like, okay, that's fine. And it's really funny looking back now, because it wasn't until a year into my job that TikTok in September of 2021 said we now have 1 billion monthly active users. And for me, I was like, this could be my shining moment. If there's 1 billion monthly active users on TikTok, they're probably not using our app. So that's how we kind of started to transform what we were really doing. So we had some videos on there, but they were very language learning forward, kind of boring, what you'd expect. And it just wasn't cutting it. And that's when that turning point happened, that we really need to start prioritizing this and figuring out how we can make it relevant.
But the content that you mentioned essentially can be seen as very straightforward, right? As kind of confrontative essentially. How do you calculate the risk associated with it? Because it obviously can upset some people, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've upset multiple people. I think what I always say is that I grew up in a very first-gen immigrant household. So I was like, if you deal with strict parents, you can do anything in life. So for me, I feel like that, my parents are laughing here. I think with that, I really learned, though, what it means to calculate risk in your own life. And when you're trying to navigate a lot of different scenarios, different people, different things, figuring out how to fit in between cultures, you become very attuned to understanding how risk works and how people will perceive you. So for that, I really took this mentality of, if I have this idea, I know I'm junior talent, bottom of the totem pole, and if I want to get respect from people to understand my ideas and want to execute them, I have to make sure that they'll feel stupid if they say no to me. Which sounds kind of harsh, but the reality is that if I set up everything for them to think that if they say yes to this idea, it'll be a success, then it'll go. That being said, with risks you take, I think you inevitably will anger people. That's the nature of risk. You just have to make sure it's not the wrong people.
fair. But for that specific content, especially that risky content, is there a specific structure in place that allows you to flourish in that kind of environment? Essentially, like, is there a specific strategy behind your ideas going viral, or how do you set that up?
Yeah. So the big thing about Duolingo, which I didn't even really know until I was working there, and I think what was cool is that I was at this place for a year before I even actually started creating the content we know today. It was really a big focus on testing and learning and constantly experimenting and optimizing. So when you have that mindset, you become more okay with making mistakes, taking bigger risks, and seeing how far you can take things. And I think the biggest thing I realized as I started taking more risks, and it was gradual, it started off small and got bigger and bigger, was that in marketing, I feel like we just take ourselves way too seriously. We think that if we post this and they're going to think X, Y, Z, then they're going to go from there. And the reality is no one gives a crap about marketing. Like, they're looking at your video because it's funny and they're entertained by it. So when we kind of brought that mindset in, we realized, all right, we want to be entertainment first. And to be entertaining, to break through the noise, it's usually taking risk and things that have never been done before. And I don't think it has to be like super out there. Like, the first risk we took was that we didn't use capital letters and like proper punctuation. And for that was like World War III, that we like decided as a language learning app, we weren't going to use proper punctuation. But when we first took that small risk and people were okay with it and they loved it, we got to keep pushing the envelope. So it's a lot of pushing it a little bit, hearing what your audience says, and then keep pushing it more.
But if you're saying that even functionality was already quite a big thing, how do you match that? Because obviously Duo, like the owl, which is basically your mascot in every second post, is on the app very helpful. It's your learning buddy, essentially, right? But on the app, it's almost like the dark side of it. So it's like very unhinged, it's very outspoken, very, very direct, essentially. How do you match that? And was there ever a discussion internally or even externally on could that harm the brand, essentially? Yeah,
it's still ongoing conversation. And it's really interesting because the reality is everyone who has a job at Duolingo has different things they're advocating for, right? So like the designers want things to be looking pristine and perfect. The social media team wants risky content. The business people want you to mention this promo code, right? Like, everyone has these things that they want. And I think as we started taking these smaller risks and steps and people saw like, all right, this is getting viral, we're getting new users, people really understood that your audience is more multidimensional than we think them to be. They know when to judge you in what way, in the sense that like, just because you're funny on TikTok or you're entertaining or you're unhinged does not invalidate you as like a language learning app. They're still going to use your app. But I think the power behind that was we had a really solid app, so we're able to make satire and make fun of it and be kind of unhinged because we have the proof in the pudding. But if you don't have that, then that creates that disconnect. But we realized that just because we were crazy, people were also fine learning a language, and they were multidimensional and able to understand and almost close the loop themselves, that you can have multiple personalities, right? Like, I'm someone different with my friend than I am with my mom than I am with anyone else, and that's how we are. And when they saw that we kind of broke down that fourth wall, it became exciting.
But does that bring you into situations where you, when you come up with an idea, think about, I'm not going to go out and I'm going to ask for forgiveness afterwards, but I'm definitely not going to get any permission for that if I ask? Is that kind of scenario that you work? Is there internal sign-off processes when you come up with a content idea, or how are you set up for that?
Yeah, so I think our social team is very much of the same mindset. And by social team, I just mean me and my boss. We're still a two-person team, but we're going at it. And there are moments where we absolutely take risks, and we have posted and we have been told to take things down. But I think the best part about that is that we've created this dynamic where that's okay. Like, our CEO is okay with saying, hey, take this down. But that's like the idea, it was funny, but maybe don't do this next time. And by okaying this thing that it's okay for you to put something up, delete it, figure out how it goes, audience, again, doesn't really care. They move on. They have so many other things to do in their life that it's just kind of a snippet of their day. They're like, whatever. It creates like this almost natural authenticity. So we definitely have had a video that I think we posted like last year, and it was a brand collab with this big sponge company that's really big in the US. And it was Duo and the brand mascot, and they were doing stuff together. And we ended up taking the video down because it was overly done and a little bit too much. And it was doing really well. So obviously, as a social person, I was like, dang it, like this is great. So I remember messaging my CEO and being like, okay, I know you don't like this, but what if we just add this, edit this, iterate it a little bit, and post it like that? And he goes, okay, fine. And we posted it. And I think it's that constant advocating and being okay with failure. And the reality is that's kind of the nature of the game. Things move fast, and it's okay to mess up.
So we're talking about TikTok a lot, right? And is there a reason why your content works specifically well on TikTok? Do you also use that content and distribute it on other platforms in the same way? Or how do you differ between the different channels?
Yeah, so I think what's really special about how we've run our social team and how we really think about content is we've kind of split up who runs what social channels by their demographic. So we have a couple contractors that help me, and we're all, I think I'm the oldest at 25, and they're all like 19 through 25, which is kind of cool. And we create that content specifically for TikTok. And then we have kind of the millennials and upper millennials on our team are working on Instagram Reels. And we actually found that cross-posting does not do well. People think TikTok, Gen Z is way too niche to put on Reels and vice versa. So we've become really good at understanding core insights for each channel and then creating content off of that. So like a big thing I always say is we chase ideas rather than trends, because trends tend to repeat themselves on all these platforms. So when you have solid ideas, you can usually link it to trends. And so we've kind of distinguished it that way.
And of that content, how much is planned, strategized? How much is intuitive? Do you have a content plan in place, or do you just basically walk around the office and be like, I got a good idea, I'm going to snap my coworker and we're going to do a video? Like, can you strategize virality, or how do you produce that?
Yeah, so I would say 90% is just grabbing a coworker and seeing what happens, and 10% is planned, which is a very big flip, I think, from how we originally think of how we should create content. And in the beginning, we did try to plan out content. And even if you look at the first videos we posted on Duolingo's account, it's very language learning forward, talking about slang and all that different stuff, and it just didn't perform. So that was a very indicated moment that, okay, we need to shake things up, switch what we've been doing. And I think before we could not plan virality. We just knew these trends. We had Gen Z people on our team that knew that had that intuitive spirit of this is going to be good, this is funny. And as we kept kind of testing, then I would say about 6 months in, we were able to be like, all right, this is exactly what our audience wants. They want the big green owl. They want it to be 8 seconds long, and they want it to be bold and risky. And so once we got that formula, then it was more easy to predict virality than in the beginning.
But you do jump on a lot of trends for producing viral videos, right?
Yeah.
So you do this quite fast. Is there a specific scanning process that you have in place? How are you able to firstly understand and capture those trends that are out there, understand which fit to the brand and which have the potential in becoming a quite big video? So how do you adapt to those, and how do you pick up the trends?
Yeah, so one of my favorite things is I genuinely enjoy being scrappy. And with that is lo-fi production, seeing where we can go and just quickly creating it. And the reality is there's really no cost to create content, like maybe the cost of me as an employee. But other than that, like, we're not putting crazy budget into these things. So when I'm creating this content, I just get excited, like, this is an idea we have, let's go for it. And I think a lot of the time we kind of get caught up in this. It needs to be hi-fi, it needs to look like this, it needs to be that way. But it doesn't. Like, for example, we had a video of Duo, and Duo is actually a suit. It's not a real owl, which a lot of people don't realize. So a human's in there. And once we had a video of the owl was jumping off of a stage kind of like this, and their legs got exposed, and they were wearing an Adidas tracksuit. And at the time, I didn't notice. I was like, I'll post it. No one's going to notice, whatever. Everybody noticed. They were like, Adidas. And then to the point where Adidas actually reached out to us saying, can we make Duo like a custom tracksuit? Because everyone's so excited about this. And then they made us a custom tracksuit and then promoted it during the World Cup. And this was all for free. So it's that really exciting moment where you're a scrappy brand. We don't have crazy budget. But when you do these lo-fi productions and you listen to your community, it can go all the way to the World Cup. Like, things are pretty crazy on TikTok, and just the limits are like, it's insane, the things that can happen.
You talked about a fail that turned into an actual success then.
Yeah.
But were there other things that completely crashed and that didn't work at all, or?
Yeah, of course. I fail all the time. No, there's a lot of videos that, like, I think are going to be great and going to be successful and are funny, and then they absolutely flop and nobody likes them. And I think a lot of the time the mentality is just like, delete it, get rid of it. But I think what we've realized is even though it may have not hit virality, as I said earlier, each piece of content is almost like an episode in a sitcom and like in a TV show. And people still refer to those like non-viral moments or remember the storyline that was developed there. Another, like a common storyline we have is like Duo versus the legal team. And a lot of those videos don't always do great, but people still remember, okay, Legal Steve, I remember this character from that one video. So I feel like success, sometimes we get really caught up in these metrics, but it can also just be building about brand love and your brand story.
But do you measure the success?
Absolutely. Yeah, I wish we didn't have to. But yeah, CEOs love numbers. So for us, our success is like a viral video is what we consider has hit over 1 million views. And that is like something that we know we always have to work towards no matter how many followers we have. Hitting 1 million is like a milestone. We also have a How Did You Hear About Us survey. So when you log on to Duolingo and you're applying for the app or whatever, they'll ask, how did you hear about us? And there's all these options, and now TikTok is one of those options. So we also measure how much each viral video is correlated to new users. And we've seen when we've had a viral video over 1 million views or even a viral comment of over, I think, 50,000 likes, we will see an influx of new users from all over the world, which is pretty crazy.
But you see that these user behaviors differ versus normal acquisition channels? Because obviously you talk about very non-product related content. Do these users turn into be lifecycle positive customers at the end of the day? Or how do they differ versus the other acquisition channels?
Yeah, so our first like unhinged new Duo content started in September of 2021, and now we're at May 2023. And the users have just kept growing from TikTok, and it's been maintained. And I think the other special thing is it's a lot of resurrected users. So people who used to be on the app stopped, saw a TikTok video, and was like, I'm going to start over again. So that has also been a really great indicator. And I think even more like qualitatively, like people are saying, like people are even applying now to work at Duo because they saw a TikTok and they just love the culture. So it's kind of infiltrated like all forms of society and culture in a new, unique way.
So if I look at the content that you have on TikTok, you're obviously projecting the company values that you have, your internal atmosphere, into the language, into the content that you produce. If you want to recommend that or even applicate it to a different brand, how can a business frame their online personality so that it matches their internal, whatever they believe for, so they can come up with such organic content?
Yeah, I think it really comes down to what your brand's human truth is. And I feel like every brand has one. It just takes a lot of digging to find it. So for us, like our brand truth is language learning is hard, so we make it fun. And that's how we've judged every single piece of content and really shifted our entire marketing strategy to be social first. And every piece of content we create is judged upon that brand insight. And when we see a very tight connection with that brand insight, success is pretty much inevitable. We always see like high results, people are loving it. And anytime we stray away from that, then things just don't really happen for us. So, and getting to that brand insight took time. It took a lot of development and figuring out. So I didn't think it came right away, but really finding a truth that is true to who your audience is and who your users are can really impact how your content performs.
So as we're getting close to the end, one last question I would have for you, and especially also for the audience to take away. Would you have 2 or 3 actionable tips that any company that is or wants to be quite active on social media, and specifically TikTok here, can take home in order to attract Gen Z and to have them engaging with their account as much as it happens on Duolingo?
Yeah, I think number one, I always say is hire Gen Z. If you want to speak to Gen Z, you should have Gen Z creating the content for you. As I said earlier, our social team is me and my boss, but also a couple contractors who are still in university. And so that is who's creating content, because we understand how people want to be talked to in our generation. So we're creating that content. And beyond that, we were empowered to post it. It was never like you do like the scrappy work and then maybe you'll see the light of day. It was always, all right, you were hired as a social media manager, like show us what you got, show us what you can post and go for it. So that empowerment of young talent, I think, is super important, and your work is only going to be as good as your talent. Number 2, I think a lot of people come up to me and say, like, we don't have C-suite approval, legal would never let us do that, how do you get away with it? My number 1 tip is get them emotionally invested in the content. When I realized legal wasn't approving our content, I was like, what if we make legal part of the content? And so then all of a sudden, when your lawyer's on camera, he wants his video to be seen by the world, right? So then he's like, all right, yeah, we can post that. I can take a risk. And the same thing happened with our CEO and our CTO. Every time they said something, we're like, let's have a brainstorm session. You come up with an idea. And the second they came up with an idea that was good and we executed on it, it did viral, they're like, look at that content we just made, right? And so it makes them feel like they're part of it. And that has been really helpful in getting approval and being able to take risks.